Okay, well, today's prophecy update, we're going to talk, I called it assault. Sometimes the last thing I do is put a title on these things because I feel this pressure to not just call it prophecy update. It has to be something special and catchy, and this is the only thing I could think of at the last minute when I realized, oh, I forgot to do my title slide. So if it fits what I'm talking about, fine. If not, don't post any comments about it because I already know it might be a problem, and I don't need your help on that. I don't need your help on the fact that it might not fit. I'll realize that when I get in talking to it. By the way, we talk a lot about the convergence of events. I did do a couple interviews this week. Jan Markell's Understanding the Time, olivetreeviews.org. That interview went up yesterday with Jan and Eric Barger and myself. And then on Thursday night, I did the Hagman and Hagman report, and you can find that on YouTube and download it through the Hagman and Hagman report on iTunes, or I think they're on Blog Talk Radio. There's a number of different sources that you can look at to get to that. As a result of doing Hagman the other night, I'm kind of running behind in prep for this morning. I didn't want to cover the same topics, just in the event that you happen to be one of the 5 people that might have listened to these things. And so I'm a little bit disjointed this morning, I will admit to you up front. But we'll try to piece everything together here. We do talk about this verse in 2 Timothy 3 quite a bit. This know also that in the last days perilous times shall come, for men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good. This is a verse that I think and the verses that follow it, are verses that we clearly see playing out in our world today. We live in a very interesting time. We do live in perilous times. I think one of the if I can offer any word of encouragement to people in the church that look at the things going on in the world and culture and they get distressed about it, is that, yeah, you should be distressed about it because it really does seem to be an order of magnitude different than it has been before. So be encouraged by that, at least that you're realizing it. The interesting thing, though, is most of the people in the world, and unfortunately I would hazard a guess that most of the people in the church have no clue. They are totally unaware, they don't want to know, or they don't know enough to know what's significant about the times we live in. One of the things that I've talked about, I did a video a couple years ago called Streams of Ecumenism. In that video, I looked at this coming together of a one world religion, particularly in what's called the Christian, I'll use scare quotes there, the professing Christian church. If you'll remember, that was done with Tim Worth, you can find it on YouTube, in August of 2014. It was shortly after Kenneth Copeland had an Anglican bishop named Tony Palmer at his church. Excuse me. I'm not coughed hardly all morning. And so he had Tony Palmer at his church, an Anglican bishop, and Tony had brought a video of the Pope saying that, now it's time for Christians to all become one and go back to Rome, essentially. And I want to give a good shout out here for Roger Oakland. Roger Oakland is back speaking now at different conferences. Roger, a decade ago, was saying, listen, this unification with the Roman Catholic Church is what's going to be one of the driving things in the end times. And we see that. We've seen pastors like Rick Warren who come out in clear support of Catholic mystics, people that have gone from his church on these mystical retreats, these contemplative prayer retreats, and talking about it like it's fine. And everybody acts like the Pope is just the greatest guy ever. And this is among a lot of people who call themselves evangelicals. And it's absolutely stunning for me to watch. As I've said a number of times, I grew up across the street from a Catholic church, and I knew they were different from a very, very early age. I was taught they were different. I was taught the differences, and now I'm stunned. I'm shocked. I'm chagrined. I'm really angered by the fact that evangelical leaders can't see the difference. It's maddening. So you can look at that video. We put some of these things together. And so this is a conference that's coming up in the Washington, D.C. in a month or so called Together 2016. I think the website is reset2016.com or .org. And they're going to have a bunch of speakers there. They're going to have, let's see, we can look at some of them. Carrie Job, very popular singer. Francis Chan. Ravi Zacharias. Hillsong United is going to sing their worship team. You have Ronnie Floyd, the head of the Southern Baptist Convention. You have Christine Caine. You have Ann Voskamp. She's a very popular author, wrote a book called 1,000 Gifts. And like Jesus called, in fact, go look up Pastor Steve Mitchell and the erotic mysticism of Ann Voskamp and Sarah Young. It's a great message. You can find it on the Fellowship Bible Chapel YouTube channel. You need to listen to that. They're going to be there. Voskamp, they tweeted this. There was a quote from her website. We don't need an explanation from God like we need an experience of God. And boy, does that ever capture what's going on in the evangelical church. Because I'm going to get in trouble for this. Ravi Zacharias is an apologist. What is going on that he's going with these people to Washington? Now, what was announced this week, though, is we're so excited that the Pope is going to send a video message to us. Now, in that video, Streams of Ecumenism, almost 2 years ago, I said this was coming in 2016, and it was going to be even accelerated in 2017, because 2017 is a couple of major anniversaries. It's a number of them. It's 50 years since the reunification of Jerusalem, and they're going to play off of that to show that the church is reunited now. The 67 war, Six-Day War, Israel took back Jerusalem and reunited the city. It was a very significant event. They're going to play off that. 500 years ago was the Reformation. They're going to play off of that event, and they're going to say, just like Tony Palmer said at the Kenneth Copeland conference in 2014, the Reformation is over. It's also the 100th anniversary of the fall of the Ottoman Empire. So there's a lot of things going on. But they're all excited that the Pope's, and I'm just telling you is, you got to be really careful when people call themselves evangelicals now. I don't think the word doesn't mean what it used to mean. And we've seen this coming. We've talked about it here for years, and now it's here. I do want to mention this young lady, Christina Grimmie. My understanding is she was a Christian gal, singer. She'd been on The Voice and finished pretty high in the competition a couple years ago. She was homeschooled. I heard very strong about her faith. She was did a concert in Orlando the other night, and after the concert, a guy came up to her. He had peppered his emails and website with a lot of anti-Christian statements, and he hunted her down after the concert, and he killed her. She's 21. So you can read, she was 21, phenomenal voice, and unfortunately, an anti-Christian hater. And I'll give the credit to the Orlando police. They've been pretty upfront about what was going on and what motivated the guy. He drove from St. Petersburg up to Orlando, waited till after the concert, killed her. Her brother wrestled him to the ground because he wanted to kill other people, and while the guy pulled out another gun, I guess, and shot himself and killed himself. So you can read about that on the news. This is a local guy, this Trey Pearson. He was a singer for some Christian rock group, and he came out recently and announced that he was gay. And I'm going to play a little clip of I know this is a little bit of torture. I'm going to play a little clip. He appeared, of course, when anybody does something like this, they get invited to The View. I never get invited to The View. I don't understand, So, don't suggest it to anybody, though, okay? Although it would be kind of fun. Here's a little bit of his interview on The View.
Even marrying a woman and having children, but just 3 days ago, he embraced who he really was publicly by coming out and starting a whole new conversation in the Christian community. Please welcome Trey Pearson.
A little over 6 months ago, I was able to finally accept who I was and be able to admit to myself that I was gay. And it was a really long, difficult journey to be able to get to that point, but I'm very thankful for being able to get there. As you said, I was married and I have 2 beautiful children, and it's just one of those things that I knew how important it was, what I had gone through and the difficulty I had gone through, to be able to have that transparency to tell other people and hopefully help other people.
Why do you think it was hard for you? Was it because of your faith, or was it because of your upbringing?
Yeah. So I grew up in a Christian home that and church where I was taught that God hated homosexuality. I feel like I'm more in love with Jesus and the scriptures than ever. And
really?
As I've progressed in my faith, and as I've experienced this grace, this restoration, this being able to embrace truth without being scared of what people that live in fear.
Well, what about the church? How's the church reacted?
There are all kinds of wonderful people in the church. It's changing right now. We've had to go through a lot of things. There's times where we've had to go through what it's like for women's rights, what it's been like for black people's rights, for minorities' rights. This happens to be a pressing issue of our time.
Well, guess what they did? Oh, Trey, you're so courageous. He left his wife and children. That's courage? I would love for somebody to go on this show sometime, say, I used to live as a gay person, I left that lifestyle, I converted to Christianity, I married and raising a family. To me, that's courage. That's something that should be praised, not somebody that runs off and leaves his wife and kids. Oh, she's my biggest supporter. And this is, by the way, the cover there on the left, that's sometimes you see them in some of the restaurants and local eating establishments, the 614 thing. So I'm sure he'll be featured prominently at the Pride Festival this coming weekend. I've talked a little bit about this. There have been a couple cover stories recently in Newsweek about the clampdown on free speech on college campuses, even to the point where they're saying you should burn some books. It sounds it sounds like Fahrenheit 451. It sounds like Orwell's 1984. Even The Economist, which a lot of people think is just a tool of the New World Order, is concerned about the clampdown on free speech in Europe. The Gatestone Institute picked up on this in an article that just came out this morning. Look at what they say here. They talk about what's going on in the European Union. And listen, what goes on in Europe is going to come here because we're such an interconnected world now. So any rules that Facebook puts in place for Europe will be the rules for America. They'll have one worldwide standard. So there's going to be a clampdown on free speech. And some people have suggested to me there's an alternative called, I haven't looked into it yet, called Seen Life or something like that. Sort of a Christian, free speech, uncensored alternative to Facebook. YouTube is also signed on, and so as a result, we've been looking into some alternative platforms just in case we get our privileges at YouTube or Facebook pulled. So just pray that we get those in place and be able to switch over quickly if we have to. For now, they're good platforms. They have millions and billions of followers, and it's a good place to do it. But here, they criticize the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel. The German Chancellor was not interested in the reinforcement of Europe's external borders, the re-erection of its internal borders, the institution of a workable asylum vetting system, and the repatriation of people who had lied to gain entry into Europe. Instead, Chancellor Merkel wanted to know how Facebook's founder could help her restrict the free speech of Europeans on Facebook and on other social media. I don't know that she's really gone back from her roots. She was raised in East Germany. Supposedly she was the daughter of a Lutheran pastor. I haven't been able to confirm that. I don't think it matters anymore. I think her leftism is a much stronger religion to her than anything else that she might have been raised in. That's usually the case. So this is a problem. People must speak up now, and must speak up fast in support of freedom of speech before it is taken away from them. It is sadly not an overstatement to say that our entire future depends on it. I'll make just a couple comments about this last night. I don't know if you heard about this. There was a shooting, a mass shooting at a gay bar in Orlando, where the Christian singer was killed just, I think, the night before. 20 people were killed, 50 injured. And again, I'll have to give credit to the Orlando police, because usually when these things happen, what's the first thing you hear? A lot of people died. It's not terrorism. Well, Orlando police have come out and said it probably is terrorism. And this is from Jihad Watch, Robert Spencer's great website. Police said the gunman was believed to be in his 20s, was not a local man, and the FBI believes he may have leanings to radical Islamic terrorism. So, what we've talked about in Europe, the problems they've had there, in Paris, in Brussels, has come home. And they said this, they've told us what they're going to do. Now, it's going to be interesting to watch, because we had San Bernardino. We now have Orlando, apparently. Let's assume that it turns out to be that way. And remember when the Attorney General of the United States, the day after, I wonder where she will go tonight to speak and not mention the obvious. Remember what happened after San Bernardino? The next night she went to the Muslim attorneys thing in California. No, it was in D.C. for their awards program. Never mentioned the shooting in San Bernardino. By then, it was obvious to everybody on the planet who was involved and why they did it and the ideology behind them. And what did the Attorney General say to the Muslim lawyers gathered there? We're going to protect you. We're very concerned about this young man who built something that looked like a bomb, and they disciplined him because he was Islamic. We're concerned about that. We're going to crack down on those people. Never mention the obvious, the elephant in the room, so to speak. We'll see what happens here. I don't have any slides on this. The president came out this week and endorsed Hillary Clinton. The same day, the White House press spokesperson, by the way, I never really noticed it before. Do you know what this guy's name is? He's the press spokesperson. He defends what Obama does. He spins it. His name is Josh Earnest. Now, if there's ever a guy who had the right name for the job that he's doing, it's Josh Earnest. His parents must have been prophets. They knew what his calling would be when they named him Josh Earnest. Okay, so that's neither here nor there. So he said that what's going on with Hillary Clinton, the State Department servers, despite her denial, is a criminal investigation. And the president comes out and endorses her. Now, this raises a whole host of possibilities. My personal view is, I don't trust the White House these days. I don't trust Hillary Clinton. I never have. I never will. It's based on experience and paying attention. I don't know if there's something buried in this may be this kind of interesting, the timing of the pardons might be something that's very interesting to watch. Obama pardons her, she gets elected, then she pardons Obama. So it's sort of there. I just suspect, like, I don't know that the Clintons do anything that doesn't have a deal behind it, either money or something to further their own power grab and career. I mean, it's been doing this for decades, if you've been paying attention. So it's kind of interesting. I mean, they're taking, there's reports out now that the guy gave millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation, and he got appointed to some nuclear task force. And the people, when he showed up at the meeting, everybody goes like, this guy doesn't know anything about, he doesn't even know what nuclear is. But he was appointed because he had connections to the Clintons. So I'm going to focus now mostly on the Middle East and a couple things that happened this week. A couple good articles, some things that you need to pay attention to. Turkey, this is a great article by Melanie Phillips. When I recommend, people say, well, what do you read? What are things you never miss? And I would say I try to never miss columns and articles by Melanie Phillips. I try not, and speeches by her. In fact, I'm going to play a little bit of a speech of hers, or a talk that she gave a couple months ago here near the end. And Caroline Glick, of course, I never miss a speech or talk or column of hers. Diana West, Claudia Rosette. They're all superb writers, analysts of the things that are going on. They all happen to be women. I wish I had more men to recommend, but I think they're all good. Claudia Rosette, Diana West, Melanie Phillips, Caroline Glick. So Melanie lives in England. She's Jewish, and she has an article in there, Turkey is a Trojan horse endangering Europe. Now, I have a whole bunch of things I'm reading right now about what's going on in the Middle East, what's going on in Syria, who's supporting who, and that type of thing. I have not yet found a way to make that coherent and present it to you as to what I really think is going on, because it's very complex. I do know that sort of the overarching thing is that the nations of the world are uniting in one fashion, they're uniting against Israel. We have the unification of religions. We have the unification of the nations. By the way, there was an imam, one of the leading imams, if not the leading imam in the world, went to talk to the Pope, went to meet with the Pope. This is all part of the process of the end times of these religions uniting. So anyway, so Melanie's article is Turkey is a Trojan horse endangering Europe. And she says this, I'll just read part of it. When does a turkey become a canard? When feathers start flying over Europe. David Cameron said this a few years ago. Turkey wouldn't join the EU until, quote, the year 3000, unquote. Sir John Major said, the idea of Turks pouring into Europe is nonsense on stilts. Melanie looks at these arguments and she says this. Their argument is made of straw. Mass immigration from Turkey does not depend on EU accession. Erdogan, who has set a trap into which the EU, hamstrung by its open borders policy, has fallen. And one of the things is, Erdogan is very clever. He has succeeded over the last 14 years or so since he came to power in Turkey, of essentially turning Turkey back towards to become an Islamic state. It was, in the 1920s, Ataturk set up Turkey as a secular state. They banned the wearing of the fez, of the, women to dress more Western. And Erdogan, whose wife dresses in traditional Muslim garb, not a full burqa, but she wears the head covering and everything you see her in. You'll see her in just a moment. He succeeded in turning that country around, and people thought that Turkey was the great example of how an Islamic country would become secular, and it has not worked out. It's not working. Erdogan demanded an end to visa restrictions on Turks entering the EU. He was therefore subjecting Europe to an exquisite kind of blackmail. She goes on to say that, well, Europe has found itself caught between a rock and a hard place on how to deal with Turkey and the immigration coming from there. And so Erdogan has exploited that. He's got Turkey to contribute money to him, in return for which he's agreed to cut off or reroute the flow of immigration into the European Union. It's not going to work because Erdogan's going to go back and demand more and more money and turn the spigot on and off as he deems advisable. So she continues, either 80 million Turks were to be given potential access to the EU, or millions of migrants from the Arab world and the rest of the impoverished South would pour in through the sluice gates that Erdogan would open. Now listen, what happens? So Turks can immigrate into Europe as they will, right? That's part of the agreement. The immigrants are supposed to stop in Turkey. Well, after they're in Turkey for a while, what are they going to be considered? Turks. Then where are they going to go? They're going to go into Europe. This is a deviously devised plan by Erdogan. I would say I admire his deviousness because it's his cunning and the way that he has put this together is really pretty amazing. She continues, caught between the toxic Scylla and lethal Charybdis. By the way, do you know, I don't know how many of you, do you know what the Scylla is and the Charybdis? Oh, well here, this is something, I learned this in law, this is something I learned in law school. Because there was a famous legal opinion, Supreme Court opinion, that talked about being caught between the Scylla and the Charybdis of these two views. The Scylla, that's the word for rock. And Charybdis is hard place, so between a rock and a hard place. So it's just something that you say to show, you kind of show that you're kind of a little bit smarter than anybody else. And I had to go look at it. I took Latin, that's how old I am. I took Latin in high school and Greek in college, and I still didn't know what it meant. I had to go look it up. So I didn't finish that, did I? Caught between the toxic Scylla and lethal Charybdis, the EU imposed terms that Turkey, where the Islamist Erdogan has been clamping down on human rights, would need to meet. These conditions, which the EU suddenly reduced last month from 72 to 5, really tough negotiations there. They caved on 67 of their points, with the implausible claim that impressive progress had been made on the rest, including reforms to Turkey's repressive anti-terrorism laws, which are used against anti-government academics and journalists. And Erdogan has completely decimated the non-Islamic oriented people from the military. He shut down one of the major newspapers there, Zaman, today's Zaman, and you can go to their website now, and it's just what it was back in March when they effectively went out of business because of the clampdowns. After an impasse over these requirements, with Erdogan threatening to ditch the block on migrants, negotiations came back on track only a few days ago. Although it is unlikely that the visa waiver will start as planned next month, it is now very much on the cards for the autumn. In other words, the Brexiteers are correct, the people who want to leave the EU. This is a big vote coming up in England in a couple weeks, or week after next, I think it is. In other words, the Brexiteers are correct. Turkey is set to funnel untold numbers of new migrants into the EU and then to Britain. The crisis also plays into Erdogan's strategy for Islamicizing Europe. He has told us this himself. At last year's celebration in Istanbul, on this 562nd anniversary of the fall of Constantinople, Erdogan told a cheering crowd of an estimated 2 million Turks, and there's no sound in this video. Here's a video from when Erdogan went to this airport to dedicate an airport in a part of Turkey, then had the then prime minister with him, you see his wife there, and he got up and he said this to the crowd. And this is what Erdogan says when nobody's really supposedly listening. What is the conquest? The conquest is hijra, expansion of Islam through immigration. That's what that is. That's what's going on, folks. Okay, this is what he said a year ago. It was May 30th, 2015. I played the video here in the update that week, if you remember. I know you don't because nobody ever pays attention. And the conquest is Mecca. The conquest is Jerusalem. The conquest is Al-Andalus. That's the word for Muslim Spain. The conquest is to open the doors of Anatolia up to Vienna for this blessed nation. It is to make the sycamore, that's a reference to the Ottoman Empire, is to make the Ottoman Empire meet with the ground that would cover 3 continents and 7 climates. What does Erdogan want? He wants to revive the Ottoman Empire. 100 years ago it fell. He's trying to bring it back. Why? As part of the Islamic Caliphate. It's what's coming. Even in the Jerusalem Post, they note this. Turkey and the EU building on a shaky bridge. Listen, this is a very big issue. Turkey is a fairly powerful country. It's, I think, the 17th largest economy in the world. It has one of the 10 largest armies in the world. It's not something to be trivialized or messed around with. And they're involved in Syria, and it's very interesting to watch how this plays out. She continues, judging by this rhetoric, Erdogan wishes to recreate the Ottoman Empire and take over much of Europe. It's a name shared by the Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, and the rest. The difference is that, courtesy of the EU, he believes he can achieve this without a shot being fired. Brussels will simply open the gates of Europe for his Islamic conquerors to enter. I was thinking about this when I read this. Remember years ago, was it Khrushchev that said, Nikita Khrushchev, when he headed the Soviet Union, we'll take you guys over in America without firing a shot. Okay, how's that going now? Not going very well. I mean, look at the election. So this is an issue. Watch for Turkey. I'll close with some things here about the Middle East and some Caroline Glick, and what I have to think was one of the strangest religious services I think I've ever seen in my life. Now, last week I played that, whatever that thing was when they opened the Gotthard Tunnel in Switzerland. That was just, I think I got more comments on that this is bizarre, this is demonic, this is satanic, and it was all of those. And it was like, how does this happen? And they're not even hiding, the satanic part of all of this. Now Switzerland's come out with some kind of, or France has come out with some kind of explanation as to explain that what we saw was really not what we saw, but I saw what I saw and I know what it is. So I'm not going to buy their explanation, okay? They're not going to hypnotize me like they've appeared to hypnotize a lot of people. So in Tel Aviv, they have a terrorist attack. And Hamas, by the way, this is Ramadan, vowing more Ramadan surprises. A popular market area in Tel Aviv, people were sitting there eating birthday cake and other things and having a nice night. And then 2 Palestinian men dressed up as Hasidic Jews got up and started shooting people. 4 dead, I think 10 or 11 wounded. Some of the people, there was I think a lady who was getting married soon. There was a mother of 4 that was killed. There was one of the top professors at a university in Israel that was murdered. And I'm going to play a little bit of that clip, but not here. I'm going to play it in the midst of, well, you'll see it. I think I'll be able to put it into context. CNN, when they reported on it, they said 2 terrorists captured. Now, the beauty of the digital world is that there are a lot of people out there that capture this stuff and keep it. CNN's taken it down. They've apologized for this tweet and the headline that they had on their website. But it happened. Terrorists were in scare quotes, like, oh yeah, it's terrorists. And it is terrorism. There's no doubt that it's terrorism. In Ban Ki-moon, apparently he knows everything. Or this is what Ban Ki-moon was, somebody underneath him, went to Israel this week and said, look, Hezbollah is really busy up there in Syria. They're probably not going to attack Israel anytime soon. I don't know if I trust most of what anybody from the UN says, but I'm just reporting to you what he did say. In America, this is an article from The Jerusalem Post by Alan Dershowitz this week. Now, Alan Dershowitz is a very left-wing law professor emeritus from Harvard. Specialty was constitutional law. And he doesn't hide his leftism, but he also doesn't hide his love for Israel. And he's a big supporter of Israel, and he's willing to speak out at all the nonsense that he sees going on. Charles Krauthammer had a similar editorial in the Washington Post, talked lovable Bernie whacks Israel. Now, what are they talking about? Well, because he got a number of, because of the number of votes that he got, Hillary Clinton, they have to appoint 15 people to the Democratic Platform Committee for their convention. Debbie Wasserman Schultz gets to appoint 4 of them. There's 15. Hillary, because of the number of votes she got, gets to appoint 6. And I frankly, I don't remember who all she's appointed. Bernie Sanders, because of the number of votes that he got, gets to appoint 5. So who does he choose? Well, 2 of the people that he chose were James Zogby, the pollster, who is a huge Palestinian supporter, very Arab American, very anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian. He also selected a guy named Cornel West, the radical left-wing professor from Harvard, who, when he's not helping out Bernie Sanders, is speaking at emergent church conferences in Chicago. Like a year ago, he spoke at this Renew conference or something like that they had in Chicago. It was the Justice Conference. Because what's the emerging church about? It's about social justice. Not about the gospel anymore. It's about what they call the gospel, but it's not the gospel. So they have no problem inviting an extreme radical like Cornel West in to speak at that conference. My friend Jim Fletcher wrote some articles. He actually went to the conference last year and endured that. So he wrote. You can look up some articles he wrote. So Sanders' picks will help shape the party platform, and this is it's very problematic because he's appointed several people that are very anti-Israel, and so there's a concern, given the state of what's going on in the world and the push against Israel, that if Hillary Clinton comes into office, the Democratic platform will at least not be as strong on Israel as it was before. So, and this is the Democratic Party where one of the leaders said this week, Nancy Pelosi, said that the government invented the iPhone, not Apple. So I guess she wants her cut. I don't know. This is the time of Ramadan, and you'll see a lot of Christians, wishing Muslims a happy Ramadan. This is the Temple Mount. I think yesterday or Friday prayers at the Temple Mount, and this is much, much less attendance than it has been in the past. Why? Because Israel shut down all people coming in from the areas of the West Bank, what they call the West Bank and Gaza. They revoked all the permits, and now everybody's upset about, Israel's so oppressive, look at what they're doing. They just had people killed in a cafe in Tel Aviv. By the way, the mayor of Tel Aviv, a Jewish guy, came out and said, well, I know why this shooting happened. It's because of the occupation. If he was in America, Bernie Sanders would appoint him to the Democratic Platform Committee. And when he talks about the occupation, my think is he needs a different occupation. Get rid of this guy because he's not helpful to the problem. And this is a problem in Israel with a lot of people doing this. The interesting thing, this is totally off the subject, but you see the Dome of the Rock. That's to the north. So these people are facing to the south. Where are they praying to? Where do Muslims bow when they pray to Mecca? Now, there's a problem with the Temple Mount. Did you know this? Because the Al-Aqsa Mosque is one of the oldest mosques in the world. It was built, in the 600s, late 600s. It was built on the foundations of the Dome of the Rock, on the foundations of the Byzantine Church, and the Al-Aqsa Mosque was built to the south, there on the south edge of the end of the Temple Mount. Now, what Islam tells us is, well, all mosques, they have a thing called I think it's called the Qibla, points to Mecca. So you can go to a mosque and so if you go to the big mosque over there between Dublin and Hilliard where I live, you'll see that it's oriented in a certain direction. Well, why is it oriented in that direction? Because it points to Mecca. Here's the problem, and Jay Smith did a great teaching at Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, probably in late November 2014, I think it was, in the fall of 2014, where he said, there's a Mecca problem with the early mosques. And what did he mean? Well, here's another picture from Google Earth of the Temple Mount looking to the south. Across the Temple Mount, you see the Al-Aqsa Mosque there. And so you would think that this mosque, if you took that line, that it would point to the Kaaba and Mecca. There's a picture of Google Earth of Mecca and that monstrosity of a building they built there, one of the tallest on Earth. So here's a Google Earth thing. Looking, you see the Al-Aqsa Mosque here in Israel. This is sort of upside down, looking to the south, all the way down there to Mecca. So the mosque in Jerusalem should line up, right? All point to Mecca. Well, what you find out is when you take the line that you have there and you extend it, it doesn't point to Mecca. Oops. But they all bow that way. So if you look at the map, there's a town in between Mecca and Jerusalem called Petra. And so when you take that line, it goes to Petra. Because the line to Mecca is a little bit off kilter, very clearly off kilter. So here's what the line would look like. That's the line to what they tell you is Mecca, but it's really Petra. That's the line to Mecca. And when you get out 1,000 miles, it's a pretty big gap. I mean, by the time you're south of the Temple Mount, you're still in the original city of David in Jerusalem. You're already kind of off, okay? And what they found is that the mosque built in the 600s at Baalbek in Lebanon, other mosques are all pointed to Petra. That's a problem. In fact, it wasn't until around between 720 and 740, almost 100 years after Muhammad's death, that they kind of got their things oriented. And so the first mosque is that's pointed to Mecca that was built in about 732 AD. There's one built in 740 that's still pointed to Petra. So it just kind of raises some interesting issues about who invented what and where did that religion come from, and can you really trust its foundations and what they say, or is it authentic? Or is it just something that people have made up over time? Draw your own conclusions. This should have been at the beginning. DEA wants inside your medical records to fight the war on drugs. Have you heard about this? A guy, and this police state monitoring things, it's already here and it's coming, but there's records that people get, and the DEA and federal law enforcement officers want access to this. And everybody says, well, they'll never use it for bad, right? Well, what happened was that they went into the Oregon records, and the government argues that, look, they give these records to people in Oregon, they give these, your records are distributed among a bunch, so you don't really have any expectation of privacy in those records. Now, I would say that this is probably a surprise to most people, but this is the position of the Obama administration when they go into court. You don't have an expectation of privacy in your medical records. And what happened in this case was they were looking through the database of people who were getting controlled substances. And they've been looking at things like testosterone, which is a controlled substance, and I guess they say they look at that because they're concerned about performance-enhancing a drug being used in a sport. But I guess most of the guys that take testosterone, for the most part, are old guys, and so they're not really a threat to LeBron James or Stephen Curry, or they're not going to, get a shot of testosterone and go play in the NBA Finals. Not likely to happen. But they also look for painkillers, because we have a big problem with painkillers. So what they did was they found this policeman in Oregon that was taking painkillers because he had had double knee replacement surgery. Okay? I've had double knee replacement surgery, and it's painful. And I praise the Lord that there are painkillers that allow you to get through therapy and that type of thing and get better and improve your life. The FDA, they went and arrested the guy, said he was taking too much. Now, 14 charges filed against him, all dropped, but it's a problem. Okay, you just should know about it. We also had this thing with continued surge of migrants coming to the U.S. from Mexico. And Mexico saying this, look, there's so many coming through Mexico, we can't do, our resources are taxed, we can't stop it, you guys are going to have to do it. The Obama administration says, well, the guys in Mexico, they're picking up most of the people, so don't worry about it. Now, this is something that's never made sense to me about this whole, because a large portion of these, well above half, are unaccompanied minors. So I did a little research, and I pulled up a map of Mexico. I got my little draw the line to see how far things are. And so they're coming from Central America. So from just over the border in Mexico down towards Guatemala to Arizona is about 1,800 miles. And I'm supposed to believe that unaccompanied minors by the hundreds are walking 1,800 miles across Mexico. I may have shared this. When I was about 10 years old, I was in Dayton, Ohio, and my cousin, my little brother, and I went out for a little bit of a walk. We thought, well, let's walk up here by this store where they had the cool Christmas tree, and hey, let's walk over by the church. And what we didn't realize was by the time we got home, we'd walked about 10 miles. We were gone for about 3 hours. Of course, we got in trouble. Steve couldn't go bowling that night. My cousin, because he was 12 and he should have known better. But we walked 10 miles. I remember, I thought I was going to die. I mean, I was sore. And you're telling me they're going to walk 20 miles a day for 3 months? Somebody's shipping these people to the border. That's my opinion. So, okay, so here, let's go back to Tel Aviv. I apologize that these are a little bit out of order today. Like I said, I did the radio interview the other night, and I got behind. So 4 people killed in this terrorist attack, just right in the middle of Tel Aviv, places that a lot of us have been. Here's Ben Shapiro's comments on the terrorist attack.
On Wednesday, 2 delightful peace-loving Palestinian Arabs dressed themselves as ultra-Orthodox diners and then shot up the Sarona market in Tel Aviv. 13 people were shot, 4 Israelis were murdered. The 2 terrorists were captured. Amir Ohana, who's a Knesset member and Israel parliament member, described the scene. Said, people were having coffee, I saw a birthday cake on one of the tables, and then you see the chairs upside down and glass shattered and blood all over. The dead. A professor at Ben Gurion University, a former Special Forces fighter with 2 kids, a young mother of 4 kids, an engaged woman who had just enough time to call her fiancé before dying of her wounds. This was a textbook terror attack. Israel has weathered such attacks for decades, but small-scale attacks on soft targets have escalated dramatically in recent years, particularly by knife. Israel released information about the terrorists. They were both from a village near Hebron, that's Hebron, in Judea. Both were in their 20s. Both were celebrated by terrorist government Hamas, which runs the Gaza Strip and is a member of the coalition government in the so-called West Bank. Hamas praised the attack. Their spokesman said the shooting was, quote, the first of many surprises planned against Israel during Ramadan. So, while Western governments continue to act with sensitivity regarding going after terrorists during Ramadan, terrorists don't really seem to care. They're just happy to kill Jews. The Palestinian Authority, meanwhile, blamed Israel for the terrorist attack. They said, quote, achieving peace requires everyone to stop taking any action that will increase tensions and resorting to violence. Palestinians, meanwhile, celebrated in the street, and they handed out candies. Naturally, the UN Security Council, they did nothing because they only condemn Israel because they hate Jews. This drove Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon, to blast the UN. He said, today's heinous attack sadly proves that when the international community refuses to condemn terror against Israelis, the next attack is only a matter of time. Terror in Tel Aviv must be treated the same as terror in Paris or Istanbul. But it won't be, because these are Jews. So both the media and Western governments treated the attack as unrelated to the broader Muslim terror war on the West. Here was CNN's original tweet on the attack. This is their headline. Quote, 2 terrorists, they put terrorists in scare quotes, captured after Tel Aviv attack, Israeli spokesman tweets. This is obviously terrific journalism, in scare quotes. So terrific that CNN later had to pull the tweet and issue a quasi-apology. They said a previous, now removed tweet appeared to call into question the Tel Aviv attack as an act of terrorism. It undoubtedly was. Well, yes, thanks for that. 12 hours later, CNN also had to issue a correction on their website. There's a reason I labeled CNN Hamas's news network on CNN during the Gaza war. Meanwhile, the State Department condemned the, quote, horrific terrorist attack in Tel Aviv, but continues to pressure Israel to make concessions to the terrorist government that celebrates and supports such attacks. Just 3 days ago, the New York Times reported the State Department had given a grant to produce a Palestinian reality TV show, this is your money, in which 3 contestants run for the job of Palestinian president by promising to boycott Israel and designating East Jerusalem the capital of Palestine. When 2 Muslims loosely affiliated with ISIS killed Americans in San Bernardino, the world rightly decried ISIS. When Islamic terrorists murdered journalists in Paris, the hashtag Je suis Charlie trends. Don't hold your breath for Ani Yehudi or Ani Yisraeli or I am a Jew. Instead, just keep waiting for the West to call on Israel to make concessions to the terrorists who murder women and children in cafes.
He's right. Now, I'll talk a little bit about this in the context of a good article by Caroline Glick, which we'll link, and you can go read the whole thing. But this is from the Tablet. I think it's kind of a center-left Jewish magazine, and they had some interesting things. They said, first of all, they talked about the Paris peace thing, which happened a week ago. We didn't talk too much about it last Sunday, but it was pretty significant. There were 29 foreign ministers that got together in Paris to talk about forcing Israel to take the 2-state solution. And the Tablet, to its credit, comes up and says, is the Paris Peace Conference different from all other peace conferences? I mean, is this just the same thing that's been going on for decades? Is this just another update of the Oslo Accords or the Camp David Accords or whatever, all the different, the Quartet plan and all the other things that have been floated out there, the Arab Peace Initiative from 2002? Well, the Tablet says this is different. Now, what's interesting is they get all these people there to talk about forcing Israel into a 2-state solution, and what happens is they have record floods in Paris and Germany, and in France and Germany. I'm sure it's just a coincidence that happens all the time. So, while the final communique, the article says, was unspectacular, it's worth recognizing the multilateral nature of the conference itself is a Palestinian strategic victory, making another step toward the internationalization of the peace process. This is something the Palestinian leadership has long sought, seeing more advantage in a process less dominated by Israel's main patron, the United States. Israel has opposed internationalization for precisely the same reason, preferring to focus on its efforts on influencing one mediator rather than many. Last week, Netanyahu claimed that the conference would undermine the possibility of peace and, quote, radicalized Palestinian demands. And the Tablet goes back and looks at the history. They go back to 1993. They look at the Oslo Accords. It happened on the White House, at the White House lawn, September 1993. The famous handshake between Yasser Arafat, the terrorist, and Yitzhak Rabin, the the Prime Minister of Israel, who was later assassinated. This is the key question bedeviling the conference and any follow-up efforts. How is this peace process different? It's fine to reaffirm the international consensus behind the 2-state solution and warn against the steps that undermine it, but without the serious prospect of consequences for those violations, it's difficult to see how any improvement in the negotiating environment and ostensible goal of this effort will be achieved. The Palestinians scored a victory by moving the process into a potentially more favorable venue, which the Israelis will continue to oppose. But the outcome from Friday suggests that Israel may not have much to fear from a planned second round of French broker talks in the fall. And it talks about the fact that there are things going on, but then Shmuley Botek wrote a column in the Jerusalem Post this week saying, does Obama have a November surprise? Now listen, Obama's a lame duck. Nobody can do anything to him. People want it to happen. He's not going to be impeached. He's going to come to the end of his term. I think he's going to leave office. I think he has bigger plans. He's pretty much done with his wrecking ball thing that he's done on the United States and the Constitution. I think he's going away. I know other people say he's going to declare martial law and all that. I'm just not on board with that, okay? I just say defeat, don't lose, don't focus on that and lose your eyes on another wrecking ball that I think is coming. Now, Samantha Powers, when she was a sort of leftist academic type, she was very anti-Israel. She even said, if Israel doesn't get along with the peace process, we should invade Israel. Then when she was appointed as the UN ambassador, she was much more supportive of Israel. But remember this a year ago was just a couple questions of her at a hearing of the House Foreign Affairs Committee in Washington.
And I want to underscore that the United States would oppose any resolution that we believe is biased or would undermine Israel's security.
But will the United States, yes or no, veto any resolution at the UN that imposes this two-state solution on Israel? What will our position be? Will we veto? You say we oppose, but will we veto? That would send a strong message.
Again, given that we worked last summer on a UN Security Council resolution with Israel that we were potentially prepared to support, and we weren't able to get everybody on the council to rally around, I think it's perilous to make blanket statements, but I want to underscore we have consistently opposed, we will oppose anything that is biased, anything that would undermine Israel's security, and I think our track record is very solid here.
Thank you. I think that's that track record that worries Israel.
Obviously, the UN might adopt a resolution that had a few non-controversial provisions, two-state solution, peace and security for all. But would we veto any UN resolution that tried to codify the parameters of a peace deal and included controversial elements in that codification?
Thank you, Congressman Sherman. I think that's a reprise of the Congresswoman's question with a slight
Yep.
shift. I really am going to resist.
She's going to answer the question because we know what's going on in the White House. That's what they're talking about, and this may be a problem in November. And it would be sort of a historical precedent, or without historical precedent that we would do that our president would do that, direct our ambassador to the UN to veto or to not veto a resolution that forced Israel into a box. That's never been the position of the United States, but a lot of things have never been the position of the United States that are changing in the world around us. So Caroline has a good article, and she talks a little bit about this peace process, and so I'll just talk about that. She also talks about Netanyahu's going to Moscow. I'm going to skip over that, but she talks about this in her column. We'll link it. You can read the whole thing. There was something poetic about the events that bookended the past week of diplomacy. This week began with French President Francois Hollande's peace conference and ended with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's state visit to Moscow. From the perspective of both substance and style, the contrast between the two events couldn't have been more striking. And she goes on to say that, what happened in Paris was really more of the same old stuff that they've been talking about before. She also said that it was very interesting. They had this peace conference. You guys need to get along with the Palestinians. They want to make peace, et cetera, et cetera. And she goes on and spends a lot of time about the fact that, well, it's just bad timing. Because what happens right after the peace conference? terrorist attack in Tel Aviv kills 4 people out for dinner on a nice evening, and they should have egg on their face. She also goes back and looks, look, every time we've tried to do this is a picture from 2005 when they were told people, the settlers, to get out of Gaza so they could get over to the Palestinians, who immediately then came in and did what? They had put Hamas in charge, a terrorist organization in charge. It also says France really has a problem with reality. They've had terrorist attacks, but also back in the same time frame, their French television too had this video on. And you remember this kid that was killed in the West Bank? Mohammed al-Dura was his name. So I looked into that, and he's become sort of an icon of the young Palestinian martyr unjustly killed by Jews. You see these posters all over the West Bank area, Judea and Samaria. You see the picture here. You see the kid screaming. He's being shot. On the left, a picture of him laying dead. You see the Israeli soldiers shooting him. Here's the prop, and here's a picture of a building in the West Bank where this is. There's a problem. They've gone in and they've analyzed bullet angles and all this stuff, and it was not possible for an Israeli soldier to have shot this kid. So here's a picture of the video that a French organization took up. And I want you to look at some of the things that are going on here. There's no sound, guys. So here's the father supposedly shielding his son behind this barrel. Now, these are guys that, this is the same time frame, same day. The French guys are having these guys go out and fake for the cameras being attacked. You see this? Oh, look, he fell down. Oh, he got shot. And then they have everybody run over to help him and this type of thing. And they take him over. They're going to throw him in the back of an ambulance. Oh, I think he's near death. And you see him crawling into the thing. And you see his friend kind of clapping and running away. See the guy right there? And he's seen later running around. So here's more with the kid being shot. He's laying dead. He's dead. He's still dead. He's dead. He's dead. And, oh, I'm going to lift my hand up and look. Is the camera still there, Daddy? Here's somebody at the wall. This shows the way these things are staged for the media. So this is all fake. So the kid there, see him lift his hand up. Now somebody said, oh, we cut that out of the film that was shown on French television because he was in his final death throes. This happens all the time. I've shown pictures, I've shown videos of rows of corpses under sheets, and you can see the legs moving, and that it's all, this is fake. So Caroline makes note of this. 15 years, she says, after the Dura blood libel, Muslims now comprise at least 15% of France's population and 40% of the population of Marseille. So when they did this fake thing to make Israel look bad, they had 10% of the population was Muslim. Now in France, it's 15%. And in one of its major cities, it's 40%. Do they have a problem or not? She also cites, this is Brigitte Bardot. She didn't look like this back in the 60s. But she's 80 years old now. And she has been charged 6 times now with hate speech violations. The last one of which was this, quote, I am fed up with being under the thumb of this population which is destroying us and destroying our country. They want to send her to jail and fine her tens of thousands of dollars for saying that in France. Because she's the danger, you understand. Netanyahu of Moscow. Despite its self-destructive tendencies, the U.S. remains the world's biggest economy and most powerful nation. Because she says the U.S. is changing too. They're going along with the significance of America's loss will lead the world the will to lead the world is not the U.S. that the U.S. will disappear. Rather, it will share the stage with other rising powers. And she goes on and talks about this. I'll let you go and read the article, and I'm going to forego this week. It's late, and we've got late start, and we're running over here, and I know you want to get out of here. So next week, I promise you, I have a clip of a recent panel that Caroline was on at the Jerusalem Post Conference. I was able to find it. And I also have a speech, talk by Melanie Phillips on the two-state solution, which I think are important talks and comments that you need to listen and see to. So where's all this going? Look, again, it's just this assault on Israel, the assault on our free speech, the assault on Israel, and the push for the two-state solution are going to continue. And we just need to get used to it and deal with it, because I think it's only going to increase here in the future. And I think it's indicative of the times that we live in. So let's pray and let's go. Father, thanks so much for, again, giving us your word. Father, I pray that you will watch over us this week, that you will help us to be ever vigilant, not only for matters of our own personal safety, but also for opportunities to share the gospel with friends around us that really need to know the Lord. Bless us as we go this week. In Jesus' name, amen.